40,000 years ago, the Earth was colder, harsher, and far more dangerous than anything we know today. This was a time of survival, where the forces of nature towered over fragile life. But even in this world of biting winds and prowling predators, one species endured. They weren't quite like us, yet they weren't so different either. Broad-shouldered, thick-browed, and resilient beyond measure, the Neanderthals lived in the shadows of glaciers and within the silence of caves. They were hunters, artists, toolmakers. For hundreds of thousands of years, they thrived, crafting a legacy written not in ink but in bones buried beneath layers of ice and time. Then they vanished, without a final battle, without a cataclysm, just silence, as if a light had flickered out in the vast wilderness of prehistory. But what if they hadn't? What if the Neanderthals, our ancient cousins, were given a second chance? What if, instead of disappearing, they survived? What would that world look like? And more hauntingly, could they have survived in ours? To answer that, we must first travel back, not just to when they lived, but to how they lived. Because before we can imagine them surviving the modern world, we must first understand the one they left behind. Long before Homo sapiens set foot in Europe, the Neanderthals were already there. Their story begins around 400,000 years ago. While our ancestors were still figuring out how to spread from Africa, Neanderthals were evolving to endure the brutal cold of Ice Age Europe. They weren't a mere primitive branch. They were specialized, adapted, masters of survival. Their bodies were designed like ancient engines, compact, muscular, and efficient. Wide noses warmed the air before it entered their lungs. Strong limbs propelled them across snowy landscapes. Thick bones told of a life lived in motion and in struggle. But what lay beneath the flesh was even more remarkable. Their brains, contrary to long-held myths, were as large or even larger than our own. The folds and structures hinted at advanced cognition, perception, and memory. They weren't brutish beasts wandering aimlessly. They were thoughtful, purposeful, and they built lives. Neanderthals lived in tight-knit communities, bands of families moving together, sharing food, shelter, and the responsibilities of daily survival. They cared for their sick, they buried their dead, and perhaps most surprising of all, they created art. In a Spanish cave, handprints adorn the walls, delicate red outlines older than any known creation of Homo sapiens. Necklaces made of eagle talons, pigment-stained tools, abstract carvings. These weren't mere decorations, they were expressions of identity, of spirit, of something we still don't fully understand. The Neanderthals had fire, not just in their hearts but in their minds. And yet, despite this, they would not last. For nearly 400,000 years, the Neanderthals survived the impossible: glacial advances, volcanic winters, predators that stalked the night. They endured it all. But around 60,000 years ago, something changed. A new kind of human arrived in Europe. They were smaller, thinner, less physically imposing, but they brought with them something unfamiliar. A strange cunning, a social cohesion that pulsed like a rhythm through their movements. And with them came tools, weapons, symbols, and strategies never before seen in the Neanderthal world. Homo sapiens had arrived. At first, the two species coexisted. Evidence shows they lived side by side, sometimes for thousands of years. There was trade, there was imitation, and there was interbreeding. Because Neanderthals didn't disappear completely. Their DNA lives on, in you, in me, in almost every person of non-African descent today. Between 1 to 2% of our genetic code is Neanderthal. The ancient flame never truly died. But within a few millennia, pure Neanderthals were gone. The reasons remain debated. Was it climate change, competition for resources, or simply a slow absorption into a rising Homo sapien tide? Whatever the answer, they were lost, and the world moved on. But now, standing in our towering cities, beneath the electric hum of modern life, we can't help but wonder, could they have lived here? Not in caves, but in apartments, not hunting mammoths, but commuting to work. Could Neanderthals have walked our streets, worked in our labs, laughed in our cafes? Would they have thrived? Or struggled? The question is more than academic. In the age of genetics, synthetic biology, and the growing power to rewrite life itself, it's also disturbingly real. Some scientists now claim that with enough genetic material and enough ambition, we could one day bring them back. But even before we face that choice, we must ask, what would they need to survive here? Not just physically, but socially, emotionally, culturally. Because to walk among us isn't just a matter of biology, it's a matter of identity. And that is far more complicated. To imagine a Neanderthal in the modern world, we must strip away our own assumptions, forget the Hollywood stereotypes, the club-wielding caveman grunting beneath fur and filth. That image is as outdated as the myths that spawned it. Instead, imagine someone not so different from you. A child born today with Neanderthal genes engineered in a lab, raised in a human home, fed human food, taught human words, shown human love. Would that child be one of us, or something else entirely? And if they were different, how would we treat them? Would we see them as a curiosity, a marvel of science, a freak or a threat? Because human history is not kind to outsiders. Throughout time, those deemed other have been feared, excluded, and often destroyed. What chance would a resurrected Neanderthal truly have? Could they find community, friendship, purpose, or would they live in quiet exile, forever caught between two worlds? One long gone and one that never asked for them. But this question of Neanderthal survival isn't just about them, it's about us. Because when we look into their ancient faces, reconstructed from fossilized skulls, we see more than just another species. We see a mirror, a version of ourselves, shaped by different paths, different choices, different landscapes. They were not our ancestors, but our cousins, and like all family stories, theirs is one we carry whether we acknowledge it or not. To ask if Neanderthals could survive today is to ask if we, as a species, are capable of embracing what is unfamiliar, what is not entirely like us. It is to ask if we are ready to extend compassion across not just culture or country, but across time. Could they have survived? Maybe, but only if we let them. But to ask whether Neanderthals could survive today is to ask how biology, behavior, and belief would collide in the crucible of our world. It's a test, not just of their endurance, but of our acceptance. And like any test, it starts with the basics, the body. Let's imagine a Neanderthal child born today, not as a relic or experiment, but as a person. They would not be monsters or beasts. They would not roar or rage, but their appearance would set them apart. Shorter and stockier than average, with a large elongated skull, a wide nose, strong jaw, a pronounced brow ridge. These are not deformities. They are adaptations, shaped by millennia of survival in an unforgiving world. But in a modern classroom, would these traits invite curiosity or cruelty? Would that child be seen as unique or as wrong? History has shown us how even the smallest deviations from social norms can become targets. We've bullied the awkward, the quiet, the disabled, the different. How would we treat a child whose very bones betray an ancient past? And how would they see themselves? This is where the question of survival becomes far more than physical. Because in the modern world, the harshest threats don't come from saber-tooths or winter storms. They come from isolation. Social life today is layered, complex, and often unforgiving. To fit in is to navigate a maze of language, nuance, expectation, and identity. And here, the Neanderthals may struggle, not because they lack intelligence, but because their strengths evolved in a world with very different demands. Neanderthals were deeply social, yes, but their communities were small, 10 to 20 individuals, bound tightly by kinship and routine. Communication may have been rich with gestures, expressions, and tones, but likely not with the abstract symbolic language we take for granted. They may have lacked the recursive grammar that allows us to build sentences within sentences, ideas layered atop ideas. If so, they might understand us, but with effort, and be misunderstood in turn. Now imagine that child again, trying to make friends in a crowded cafeteria, trying to understand sarcasm, social cues, shifting alliances. Would they be able to adapt, or would they retreat slowly into silence? This is not to say they couldn't learn, The plasticity of the human brain, Neanderthal or otherwise, is profound. But the question isn't just whether they could adapt. It's whether we would give them the space to. Beyond childhood lies a harder world, the adult world, filled with judgment, expectations, and endless demands to perform. Would a grown Neanderthal find work, love, respect? They might possess incredible strengths, endurance, focus, spatial awareness. Studies suggest Neanderthal brains may have favored visual and motor skills. In modern contexts, this could translate into talents for craftsmanship, engineering, or design. But would anyone see past the exterior, past the media narratives, the caveman jokes, the scientific curiosity, or would they be reduced to a headline? A real-life Neanderthal spotted at university, Stone Age DNA in a modern suit. Are they even human? Because behind the science and speculation lies a deeper truth. Our world is not built for those who do not conform. From fashion to facial recognition, from medical diagnostics to psychological norms, our systems are designed around us, Homo sapiens. And often only a narrow band of us at that. What happens when someone falls outside the algorithm? But what if we flipped the question? What if instead of forcing a Neanderthal to adapt to our world, we adapted our world to them? It's not impossible. In recent decades, we've seen society begin, imperfectly, painfully, to become more inclusive. Neurodiversity is gaining recognition. Accessibility is improving. Conversations about difference, identity, and belonging are louder than ever before. Could a Neanderthal become part of that movement? Could they become not just a survivor, but a symbol? A reminder that humanity isn't one straight line, but a branching tree of possibilities. If raised with care, given community, and offered dignity, they might not just survive, they might thrive. But that future depends on us, because they wouldn't have the power to choose how the world sees them. We would. There is, of course, another layer to this question, one that stirs deeper anxieties. If Neanderthals could live among us, should we bring them back? Some scientists have speculated that with enough preserved DNA, we could one day reconstruct a Neanderthal genome, implant it in a human egg, create life where once there was extinction. The ethics are murky, the implications enormous. Is it resurrection or exploitation? Would they be a person or a project? And if they suffered, physically, emotionally, spiritually, who would bear that responsibility? Would we treat them as equals or as exhibits? The question of Neanderthal survival is no longer science fiction. It's a mirror held up to our desires, our arrogance, our empathy. Could they survive? Yes. But the real question is, would we let them live? We often speak of Neanderthals in the past tense, as a people lost, a species gone, a branch of the human tree snapped off by time and tide. But that's not entirely true, because they are not entirely gone. They live on, in fragments, in blood, in bone, in code. When the first Neanderthal genome was sequenced, it revealed something staggering. Most modern humans, particularly those of non-African descent, carry between 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA. This isn't metaphor, it's biology. The result of ancient encounters, some fleeting, others lasting, between Homo sapiens and Neanderthals in Ice Age Europe and Asia. And those echoes remain with us to this day. They shape more than just our genes. They shape our health, our behavior, perhaps even our identity. Because the question, could Neanderthals have survived today, may not be hypothetical at all. In a way, they already do. Some of the Neanderthal genetic legacy is neutral, inert stretches of DNA that float in the genome like ancient driftwood, but some of it is active, and it matters. Studies have linked Neanderthal DNA to traits in modern humans, both beneficial and burdensome. Variants that affect the immune system, helping us fight off viruses, others that influence skin tone, hair type, or how we respond to sunlight, even the way we feel pain or process sleep. Some research suggests a connection between Neanderthal genes and modern conditions, like depression, nicotine addiction, even the severity of COVID-19. The legacy is complex, neither curse nor blessing, just inheritance. We carry them with us, not just as an idea or a memory, but in the very structure of our bodies, and so the question deepens. If they're part of us, why do we still treat them as other? Perhaps it's because we still don't know how to face our own origins. We like the myth of being exceptional, that Homo sapiens are the peak, the pinnacle, the lone survivors because we were smarter, better, chosen. But evolution doesn't work in straight lines, and history is not a victory parade. Neanderthals didn't fail, they weren't weak. They thrived for 10 times as long as our own recorded history. Their disappearance wasn't a punishment, it was a convergence, a mixture, a quiet fading into the bloodstream of a species that would go on to light cities and split atoms, while forgetting where some of its fire came from. To imagine a Neanderthal surviving today is to confront our amnesia, to acknowledge that we are not as pure or as distinct as we pretend to be. We are a mosaic, and within us the Neanderthals have survived. But legacy isn't just about genetics, it's about the choices we make with the knowledge we hold. As we push the boundaries of science, editing genomes, cloning life, simulating minds, we stand on the edge of a new era, one where resurrection becomes less fantasy and more responsibility. We could, in theory, bring a Neanderthal back, but why would we? To satisfy curiosity, to atone for extinction, to prove that we can? Or would it be an act of cruelty? A life created not for its own sake, but for ours. The past whispers to us not to be repeated, but to be understood. And the Neanderthals, silent for so long, may be trying to teach us something. About coexistence, about humility, about the fragility of survival. If we listen closely enough, we may find that their story isn't so different from our own. It's a story of struggle, of adaptation, of love and death and firelight, a story of being human, even if not entirely like us. So, could Neanderthals have survived today? Yes, with shelter, with guidance, with compassion. They had the mind, the body, the will. What they may have lacked was a world ready to receive them, but perhaps that world is beginning to take shape. In the voices of scientists calling for ethical progress, in the rise of movements that celebrate difference, in the growing recognition that humanity is not a single thread, but a woven tapestry of origins, struggles, and dreams. We cannot rewrite the past, but we can choose what we carry forward. And if we carry the Neanderthals not as relics but as relatives, then perhaps their story is not over. It's still being written in all of us. Somewhere long ago, under the wide and starless sky of Ice Age Europe, a child sat beside a fire. The wind howled beyond the mouth of the cave. The flames danced on stone walls painted with ochre and ash. Behind them, their kin dozed, worn from a day of foraging, hunting, surviving. In that flickering glow, the child watched the fire with eyes wide and wondering. They did not know they were Neanderthal. They did not know they would vanish. And they certainly did not know that 40,000 years later, people unlike them, but not so different, would gaze into glowing screens, asking whether that child could have lived in their time, whether that child could have been one of us. We have spent much of our history dividing the world into them and us. We drew that line between nations, between faiths, between colors, between castes, and eventually even between species. Neanderthals became one of the first to stand on the wrong side of that line. Early scientists dismissed them as stupid, brutish, half-formed. They saw the sloped forehead and heavy brow and assumed inferiority. They saw the bones, but not the burden. The skull, but not the soul. For decades, Neanderthals became symbols of backwardness. Insults hurled across schoolyards, caricatures on commercials, monsters of misunderstanding. But slowly, the evidence told a different story. They buried their dead. They crafted tools. They made art. They shared food, sheltered their injured, and loved their young. They mourned. They mattered. And in that truth, a quiet revolution began. We began to see them not as a warning of what we once were, but a reflection of what we always have been: resilient, curious, flawed, fragile. They were human, not in name perhaps, but in every way that counted. And now, science offers us something strange and beautiful: a reunion, We do not have to speculate where the Neanderthals went. We carry the answer within us. Every time we take a breath, speak a word, dream a dream, they are there, in our blood, our bones, our shadows. They did not vanish. They were absorbed, not erased, remembered. The ancient child by the fire did not disappear. Their lineage endured, through collisions and couplings, through exile and evolution, until at last, they became part of you. And that means something. It means survival is not always victory in the traditional sense. It is not about conquest, or dominance, or isolation. It is about integration, about leaving something behind that endures, about being part of the long, winding story of life, written in genes, in fossils, in fire. Could Neanderthals have survived today? They already have, not just in our cells, but in our capacity to change, to question old myths, to unlearn superiority, to see the dignity in every path evolution could have taken and did. The real miracle is not that Homo sapiens outlasted all others. It's that, in the crucible of history, different kinds of humans found each other. And for a time, however brief or messy, they chose to share the world, to connect, to build something new. And that choice, more than any weapon or technology, may be the truest definition of humanity. So as you move through your modern life, through cities lit by 1,000 suns, through towers of glass and circuits of code, remember this: there was once another kind of human who walked this earth. They faced blizzards and beasts. They carved tools and painted caves. They raised their young, grieved their dead, and stared at the stars in awe and fear. They made it through unimaginable hardship, and though they are gone in body, their story is not lost. It lives in you. Every heartbeat you carry is an echo of theirs, every breath a testament to the fires they once kept lit. To imagine them in our world is not an exercise in fantasy. It's a reminder of the worlds that once were, and the silent truths still written in our blood. They were different, but not less. And in knowing that, truly knowing that, we come a little closer to understanding not just who they were, but who we are.